friend. Okay, the Santero tradition in New Mexico starts really about 1750s, and it starts when a man from Spain by the name of Don Bernardo de Neri Pacheco from the northern part of Spain, from the Burgos, Montañas de Burgos, the mountains of Burgos, came to New Mexico on behest of Governor Martin de Valle. Martin invited him because he was a well-known cartographer, but he was also a fabulous painter, and his cartography skills, map-making skills, like I said, brought him here, but he was a fabulous carver and painter, and he did some of the first work in New Mexico. From that time on, we have a tradition that people followed him, probably learned from him. He wrote about and talked about pigments throughout his life in New Mexico, made many pieces, and the Santeros began following his tradition, but using homemade pigments, native pigments that were found locally. Don Bernardo was able to bring stuff up from Mexico, oil paints, but unfortunately the local Santeros, the same makers that were his students, and those who followed them were only able to make locally or use locally, obtained materials. It is a fact that some of the materials came from Mexico, things like indigo, plant dye, cochinilla, a little insect dye, and other pigments were brought up as a trade item from central Mexico. For the most part, the Santeros used natural, native pigments on panels they cut out of wood from ponderosa pine, and also carved out of cottonwood and other woods here in New Mexico. So there were two traditions. The carving tradition known as bultos, and the retablos, the flat images, the icon known as retablos. And that tradition continued until just about the time of the railroad in New Mexico during the American period, the late 1870s, 1880s, when the railroad got to New Mexico. And that pretty much ended the Santero tradition. Imports started coming in from back east, paper prints and cheap plaster statues, and there was no need for local people to produce Santos anymore because they could get them very cheaply from back east, and that kind of ended the tradition. Starting in the 1960s, the tradition began to be revived during the kind of cultural awareness period in this country, and certainly by the 70s and the 1980s, the tradition was in full swing again. I started making Santos in the late 70s, and I've been a teacher of Santos all my life. So the tradition continues, and we're here today for the Santero market, which is a celebration of the revival of that tradition and the continuity of the tradition of making Santos.